Hey y'all.
Hey Gallivanters.
So today we wanted to talk to you about something we get a lot of questions about, and that is COVID testing for international travel. If you plan on traveling internationally, coming back to the United States, you have to have a viral test no more than 3 days before you come back into the U.S. And you'll have to show that negative test when you board your flight.
Yes. And as she said, it has to be 3 days before your flight departure. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're saying 3 days instead of 72 hours is because I guess they feel that gives you more time and flexibility, and that way it's not set to when your flight leaves a certain time, a certain time of day. So that way it gives you 3 days instead of 72 hours.
Yeah, to make up for any time differences that may be in there and that sort of thing. So,
Right.
So in that example, if you had a flight on a Friday night, you could take the test as early as Tuesday morning, and you'd still be okay.
Right.
So, another important note is this only applies to air travel. This does not apply to land crossing. So obviously here from the U.S., that would be to Mexico or Canada. The rules there are different. This is specific to flying.
Yes. And on that note, if you take your test and for some reason your flight gets canceled or delayed and you don't make it to your destination within that 3-day time frame, unfortunately,
Yep.
you do have to take the test over.
Yeah, and that's just kind of part of the risk, I think, of deciding to travel now. It is up to the airline to determine if you have the appropriate documentation or not. So, because we've been asked, well, who checks that? Well, that's who checks it when you fly. They make sure that you have all of the correct documentation done when you check in.
Right. So if you test negative before your flight back into the U.S., I know that the CDC recommends that you get another test 3 to 5 days after you get back. And then you also should quarantine for at least 7 days. Even if you test negative, you should still quarantine for the full 7 days. And if you don't get tested, then they recommend that you quarantine for 10 days. But it's good to check your local and state, sites and see what their recommendations are as far as travel.
Yeah, and some have requirements on quarantining if you've traveled internationally. So, just check your state jurisdiction, but definitely highly recommend getting tested 3 to 5 days after you've traveled.
Right.
And plan on quarantining for a minimum of 7 days, regardless. It's also important to note that if you're traveling somewhere else and you bought tests that you're planning on using elsewhere, some places don't allow tests that aren't authorized or originating from that country to come in. So in other words, if you bought a test in the US and wanted to go to, France or Italy, make sure that test, it's okay for you to bring that test into that country. Because, again, there are some restrictions on that. Now, we're going to get into what to do when you go to another country. And in our case, we're using the UK because that is where we're going.
Right.
Every country's requirements are different. And the best advice is to tell you to look on their official government website to find out what those requirements are. So we just use the UK because that's what we've been following and what we're most familiar with. So in the UK, you need to have your CDC card that shows, if you're a US citizen, that shows proof of vaccination. You also will need to show proof of residency. So that would be, in our case, a passport, but it could also be a visa. Mm-hmm. Or a green card. Mm-hmm. In that, there are specific rules for us from the U.S. going to the UK because the U.S. is currently an amber country. So those rules, we're going to kind of go over those, what all you have to do if you're coming from an amber country to the UK. So here's the list of things you have to do whether you're fully vaccinated or not. You have to take a COVID test within 3 days before your arrival in, or your travel to England. And you also have to have already booked and paid for another test to be taken on or before day 2 in England. So in our case, we went ahead and we used actually our airline, which is what we're going to recommend you do, is go through whatever airline you're using, because they will know what tests are approved for what countries. So we booked all of our tests and got them in the mail. This one will be our pre-departure test. We have another one for our coming back, so it's accepted both places, and these are actually going to be supervised over a video call. Yep. Day 2 test is one you can just put in the mail. So this one is good in the UK, and it already comes pre-stamped with the Royal Mail ready to go back. So we'll just take those on day 2, drop them in the mail, and we're done until we get ready to come home.
Yep.
So those things have to be done regardless of your vaccination status.
Now note that not all of the vaccination programs are recognized in other countries, so make sure you check that country's website to make sure that whatever vaccination or test that you're taking, they recognize and they'll accept.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, in the U.S. there was primarily Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, or Moderna. I think they want to make sure it's either Pfizer or Moderna. I don't think they let you go on just the one shot Johnson & Johnson. I could be wrong on that part, but I do know at one point there was talk of people mixing and matching, like having one Pfizer shot and one Moderna shot.
Right.
The UK will not recognize that as being fully vaccinated.
Okay.
So, again, it just depends on what vaccines you've had from what country, as to whether or not the country you're traveling to recognizes those.
Now, if you plan on being in England for less than 2 days, you still have to book and pay for the COVID test. And you still have to take it if you're there on day 2.
Yep. So, as I was mentioning, not all vaccines are recognized. And if you're not recognized as being fully vaccinated, when you travel to England, you have to quarantine either at home or wherever you're staying for 10 days. And you have to take a COVID test on or before day 2 and on or after day 8. So just be aware that, if you're not fully vaccinated or not vaccinated by a program that's recognized by England, you will have some quarantine time.
Yes. Now, if you're in England less than 10 days, you still need to take a test on day 2 and on day 8.
Yep.
So it's still required.
Yep, and the quarantine's still required.
Right.
So, yeah, just if you have to be there and you're not fully vaccinated, can't get fully vaccinated, okay, but our advice is to be fully vaccinated before you go.
Right. So once you've completed your testing 3 days before your flight to England, you also need to complete a passenger locator form within 48 hours of your arrival to England.
Yep. And those are typically available. I think the airlines have those available, as well as I think the UK government has a link to that as well. And, obviously once you're negative and you get on your flight, you're good to go as long as you follow all of these requirements. But again, we just want to clarify, this is for fully vaccinated travelers from the US to the UK currently. So we are to England specifically, and we are currently in an amber country.
Right.
So just know that there are countries that are green, there are countries that are red. So if you're in a green country, you still have to take a test before you go, but there will be different requirements after that. If you're in a red country, I'm not even sure if you can go unless it's an emergency or something. But if you can, again, look at the UK government website. It will be on there. So what we did and what we would advise you to do again is whatever airline you've booked a ticket to get to England on, they all will have a website or a link to COVID testing. So all the major U.S. airlines have them: Delta, United, American. We're flying Virgin Atlantic, which is a Delta partner, and they had their own partners that we were able to just go ahead and pay for all the tests, and that way we know we've got them and can get them scheduled in time and do everything we need to do. So that would be the best advice. Do your research on the government site, and then do your research on your airline's site.
And I would also recommend checking it daily, because this is all changing daily.
Yes.
And so check it daily just to make sure you're still on track and everything's good to go.
Yeah. And one other thing, because as we're getting ready to go, we've had a lot of people make this comment. Remember that the UK is not necessarily part of Europe. So I know the EU has been talking about different restrictions for US travelers. Any of those changes have not impacted the UK currently, and those changes, are different. So, and we're also going to Scotland, and right now we're good because we're going to be in the UK for more than 10 days before we get to Scotland. But there's a chance that we may end up, once we're over there, we may end up having to take another test to get from England to Scotland, and we're fine with that.
Yeah.
We know that's a chance, and they're not fun, but it's not like it's hard.
Right.
So that's our advice. Just definitely stay on top of any changes. The closer you get to your trip, the more frequently you should check for any updates on that. And I think that wraps it up.
I think it does.
So I hope this helped. Again, we've had a lot of people ask a lot of questions, and so we wanted to kind of give you all the information we knew and kind of where to go. And I'll try and add some links down below to like the CDC and the different government websites so that you can see all those rules yourself. But if you have any other questions, we'll do our best to answer them. Leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to give us a like.
Make sure you hit that subscribe button.
And don't forget to ring the bell.
Dingy dong.
So you'll be the first to be notified of any new content we release. And just remember, y'all.
Until next time, live your best life.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.